Imagine finally going silent with someone who thrived on your every reaction, and suddenly the world doesn't feel calm, it feels explosive. What you think is peace becomes their panic. What feels like freedom becomes their unraveling. And in that quiet, the truth about control, power, and your own strength is revealed in ways no one ever warns you about. When both you and the narcissist go silent, the world doesn't calm down, it destabilizes. The stillness feels deceptive, almost peaceful on the surface, but underneath it triggers a profound psychological shift. This is not mutual closure. This is a rupture in control. For the first time, the familiar emotional rhythm is interrupted, and that disruption matters more than any argument ever did. You may feel disoriented, tempted to fill the space, tempted to explain or clarify, but something crucial has already changed. The silence removes the narcissist's mirror. Without your reactions, reassurance, or resistance, they are forced to confront a void where certainty used to be, and that void terrifies them. Most people misunderstand this moment because silence looks passive from the outside. It isn't. Silence is active when it breaks a pattern. For you, it may feel like restraint, grief, or exhaustion finally winning over hope. For them, it is a threat assessment. Narcissists are not wired to experience silence as reflection or respect. They experience it as loss of leverage. They replay past interactions, searching for the exact moment their influence weakened. They are not asking what they did wrong. They are asking how the system failed. Your quiet becomes evidence that something is no longer working the way it always has, and that realization creates internal pressure. During this recalibration phase, they often appear unaffected. This is intentional. Narcissists believe control is restored through patience and positioning, not vulnerability. They may seem busy, detached, even thriving. Behind the scenes, they are monitoring, tracking, and interpreting every available signal. A post, a like, a change in routine becomes data. They are attempting to predict when you will reach out, because historically, you always did. They trust the conditioning they built in you more than they trust the present moment. Their confidence is not strength, it is dependence on repetition, and silence interrupts repetition at its core. As time passes and you remain quiet, something shifts internally for them. Confidence turns into irritation, then into doubt. The familiar emotional hooks stop working when there is nothing to pull. This is when the recalibration intensifies. They begin testing the environment in indirect ways, mentioning your name to others, surfacing in shared spaces, or subtly signaling availability. These are probes, not reconciliations. Each move is designed to measure whether you are still emotionally reachable. When those probes fail, the narcissist is forced to confront a reality they avoid at all costs. Influence is not guaranteed, and power can expire. For you, this same silence functions very differently. While they analyze externally, you begin reorganizing internally. Without constant emotional interference, your nervous system starts to downshift. Clarity returns slowly, unevenly, but unmistakably. You begin to notice how much energy was spent anticipating reactions, managing moods, and preserving peace. The silence creates space for your own thoughts to surface without correction or punishment. This is why healing often feels uncomfortable at first. You are not used to this much psychological autonomy, but each day you maintain silence, you weaken the old conditioning and reinforce a new internal authority. The longer the silence holds, the more unstable the narcissist becomes, because silence in their world is never neutral. It either signals an opening to regain dominance or a warning that dominance is slipping away. When neither option materializes, anxiety takes its place. They feel the ground shift because the dynamic they depended on required your participation. Your silence removes the stage. And once that happens, the cycle cannot restart in the same way. This is the moment where patterns break permanently, not through confrontation, but through absence. When both sides fall into silence, the contrast in emotional experience is stark and revealing. For you, the silence carries the full weight of the past, the betrayals, the confusion, the relentless exhaustion from navigating the chaos. Each quiet moment reminds you of unanswered questions, broken trust, and the version of yourself that endured far too much. There is grief in this pause, not only for the relationship, but for the self you temporarily lost in the process. Sleep may feel lighter, thoughts heavier, and memories sharper. Your silence is not passive. It is the product of reaching the limits of your endurance, a deliberate act to reclaim space, dignity, and a sense of personal clarity amidst the aftermath of manipulation. Meanwhile, the narcissist experiences silence in a completely different register. Their reaction is not reflective, not emotional. They do not pause to mourn or consider the damage caused. Instead, they encounter silence as an inconvenience, a disruption to a system they assumed would run predictably. They are used to your attention, your reactions, and even your resistance, feeding their sense of control and importance. When that stream abruptly halts, it creates irritation, not introspection. The absence of your engagement is perceived the way one might experience a paused service, mildly frustrating, inconvenient, and worthy of attention, but not of genuine emotional reflection. In their mind, there is no loss, only a disruption to the habitual reinforcement they depend on. This divergence creates a fundamental psychological disconnect between you and them. You are processing grief, reconstructing identity, and navigating emotional aftermath, while they are calculating, observing, and strategizing. Each day you remain silent. They analyze your absence, probing for meaning, trying to determine if it is temporary or a threat to their ego. They ask themselves familiar questions. Why aren't they responding? Did I lose control? Will they return? But these questions are devoid of emotional depth. They are not asking out of concern, care, or reflection. They are tactical, aimed at restoring the sense of dominance that silence threatens. The dissonance between your internal heaviness and their strategic irritation underscores the profound emotional chasm between survivor and manipulator. Over time, the clarity of this divergence becomes even more apparent. You begin to sense how much emotional labor you invested, how much self-suppression was necessary to maintain a fragile peace, and how much of your identity was compromised in service of someone else's ego. The weight of what you endured becomes tangible, almost liberating in its recognition. For the narcissist, silence is a puzzle to solve. What once worked effortlessly, their habitual control, the emotional manipulation, the instant access to your reactions, no longer functions predictably. Their frustration grows as the silence continues, revealing not remorse or introspection, but confusion and a subtle, mounting sense of threat to their ego. This is the moment where the power dynamic begins to truly shift. Your experience of silence is rich with emotional processing and the rebuilding of self, while theirs is confined to calculation and irritation. The contrast exposes an uncomfortable but liberating truth. The emotional depth you carry is entirely your own, while the narcissist's experience remains shallow and self-centered. This distinction clarifies why healing can take time. It is not merely a cessation of interaction, but an active reclaiming of identity, autonomy, and peace that had been overshadowed by manipulation. As days pass, you realize how heavy the burden of maintaining connection was, while the narcissist grapples with an absence they cannot easily define, let alone resolve. Your silence becomes the foundation for permanent boundary and liberation. When both sides fall into silence, the dynamic shifts in ways that are profoundly revealing. For you, silence becomes a sanctuary, a space where the weight of past trauma, manipulation, and emotional exhaustion begins to ease. It allows you to reclaim perspective, reflect on patterns, and reconstruct your sense of self outside the influence of coercion. Every quiet moment offers room to heal and regain clarity. For the narcissist, however, silence is a psychological assault. Their carefully curated sense of dominance falters when they are deprived of the immediate feedback that once validated their ego. The absence of your responsiveness forces them into a state of disorientation and agitation because control was always the foundation of their interactions. Your emotional detachment exposes an imbalance they cannot tolerate. They are accustomed to constant engagement. Your reactions, apologies, caretaking, or even resistance, all feeding the illusion of their importance. When that input vanishes, they interpret it as rebellion, a direct affront to their perceived authority. Silence is never neutral in their world. It is defiance, a crack in the psychological hierarchy they thought unshakable. The absence of reaction strips them of relevance, leaving their ego exposed and vulnerable. They cannot process this void with nuance or self-reflection. Instead, they generate distorted narratives, framing your quiet as manipulation, disrespect, or betrayal, all in service of preserving their internal sense of superiority. As your silence continues, the narcissist's internal calculus intensifies. They analyze, predict, and attempt to regain control through observation or subtle testing. Their internal dialogue becomes a swirl of insecurity and entitlement. Why aren't they responding? Are they punishing me? Will they fold? Even though they caused the dysfunction, they rewrite reality to protect their self-image. Arguments once gave them dominance. Your reactions were their power. Now, the lack of engagement removes the stage entirely, and they are forced to confront an unfamiliar truth. They are not indispensable, desirable, or omnipotent. The emptiness left by your withdrawal is intolerable because it exposes the fragility of the identity they rely on external validation to maintain. For you, silence is restorative. For them, it is destabilizing. You experience space to breathe, process, and understand the extent of what you endured, while they feel the vacuum of lost control. This absence forces them to reckon with a reality they have spent years avoiding, the unpredictability of life outside their influence. They cannot frame your disengagement as a boundary or a necessary act of self-preservation. Instead, they assign intent, imagining schemes, strategies, or competitive stances that justify their need to dominate. Your quiet threatens their entire sense of stability because it signals something they cannot manipulate or predict: your autonomy. Ultimately, your silence becomes a mirror reflecting their own insecurity, while simultaneously cultivating your resilience. As they scramble to reconstruct control, they expose the patterns of dependency, entitlement, and fragility that were hidden beneath confidence and charm. You begin to see the difference clearly. Your inner world grows stronger, richer, and freer, while their outer world is a house of cards, dependent entirely on others' compliance. Each passing day reinforces this imbalance. Where silence empowers you, it destabilizes them, marking the slow but irreversible unraveling of the control they once wielded effortlessly. Your quiet is no longer a retreat, it is a reclamation of power. You were part of that system, whether you realized it at the time or not. Your emotions, your responsiveness, your willingness to explain yourself, and your tendency to return after conflict all reinforced the narrative they depended on. Each reaction confirmed their belief that they held psychological authority. When you go silent, that system stalls. The familiar feedback loop disappears, and with it goes the evidence they use to validate their dominance. This interruption forces a moment of exposure they cannot comfortably face. It highlights a truth they avoid even internally. Their sense of power was never self-generated. It depended on your engagement. Your silence challenges the role they assigned you and destabilizes the identity they carefully curated around control. Without your reactions, they are left with nothing to push against. There is no emotion to provoke, no defense to dismantle, no response to manipulate. This absence becomes threatening not because they value the relationship in a healthy way, but because it undermines the structure that allowed them to feel significant. Their mind becomes restless. They replay conversations, search for missed signals, and scan for evidence that someone else has replaced them. The silence grows louder for them because they no longer have access to your internal world. That lack of visibility removes the illusion that they can predict or manage you. They are no longer central, and that psychological displacement is intolerable. As this realization sets in, their internal state shifts rapidly. Arrogance gives way to anxiety. Entitlement turns into suspicion. Certainty dissolves into instability. All of this is triggered not by confrontation, but by absence. From the outside, nothing appears to be happening. But internally, the narcissist begins cycling through compensatory behaviors designed to restore equilibrium. These responses are not emotional growth or accountability. They are survival mechanisms for an ego that depends on control. When silence threatens that control, the narcissist does not self-reflect. They act. And those actions follow a pattern that becomes predictable once you understand it. One of the first strategies they reach for is hoovering. This happens when they sense that your silence is not momentary. Initially, they assume you will return because you always have. When that expectation fails, urgency sets in. Hoovering is their attempt to pull you back into the dynamic, not out of love, but out of necessity. They may send a gentle message, reference a shared memory, or manufacture a crisis that requires your empathy. The tone may feel softer, reflective, or remorseful. But the objective is not repair, it is reattachment. Reestablishing control restores their emotional stability. If hoovering does not produce the desired response, they often escalate to baiting. Baiting is designed to provoke a reaction of any kind. Narcissists are indifferent to whether your response is positive or negative. What matters is that they caused it. They may post content intended to spark jealousy, send a dismissive remark, or create unnecessary tension that pressures you to engage. Anger still feeds their sense of relevance. Silence starves it. Baiting is their attempt to break the quiet by triggering the emotional patterns they once controlled. Any reaction confirms you are still reachable, still emotionally tethered, still part of their system. When baiting fails, the strategy often shifts to triangulation. This is where another person is introduced, not for genuine connection, but as a psychological lever. An ex, a new partner, a friend, or even a family member becomes part of the narrative. They may flaunt attention, imply replacement, or present themselves as misunderstood and victimized. The goal is displacement. They want you to feel insecure, replaceable, or threatened enough to respond. Triangulation is about regaining superiority by creating comparison and competition. It is not about moving on. It is about proving they still matter more than your boundaries. Each of these behaviors reveals the same underlying truth. Your silence removed the foundation they relied on to feel powerful. What looks like confidence unravels into desperation when control is threatened. Meanwhile, your continued quiet strengthens something very different. It reinforces your autonomy, your clarity, and your separation from a system that once depended on your compliance. The more consistently you remain silent, the more obvious the imbalance becomes. Their actions grow louder and more revealing. Yours remain restrained and self-directed, and in that contrast, the dynamic finally breaks. It's important to understand that the narcissist's behaviors, hoovering, baiting, and triangulation, are never acts of genuine care or affection. They are desperate attempts to lure you back into defending your worth, to reassert the position they once held over your emotional world. These actions are proofs not of love, but of dependence. Narcissists construct their sense of identity entirely around external supply, attention, reactions, validation, and even conflict. When that supply is withdrawn, your silence creates a psychological vacuum they cannot tolerate. Their strategies, born from entitlement, fear, and ego disruption, are attempts to plug that void and restore the illusion of control, not to rebuild connection or intimacy. As the silence stretches, a profound divergence unfolds between your experience and theirs. While you may feel relief, clarity, or the first true moments of peace, the narcissist experiences escalating unease. Your quiet is not interpreted as calm. It is perceived as a loss of control, a fracture in the system they relied on to feel important. Their identity is so externally dependent that your absence triggers an internal alarm. Without your engagement to anchor them, their self-esteem begins to destabilize. Every passing day of silence intensifies this disruption, turning what might appear passive into a powerful psychological statement. The quiet you cultivate is not neutral. It is a catalyst for their internal panic. Narcissists require constant emotional stimulation to sustain the fragile construct of self they present to the world. Attention, admiration, drama, and reactions are the scaffolding of their ego. When you stop supplying it, they experience a collapse they cannot regulate internally. Initially, they may attempt to mask it, pretending indifference, acting detached, or displaying relief, but these facades crumble over time. The silence becomes inescapable, stripping away the anchors that made them feel significant, central, and indispensable. Suddenly, they feel overlooked, irrelevant, and ordinary, states they cannot endure because they strike at the core of their deepest fears: invisibility and insignificance. Meanwhile, your experience of silence is the opposite. Without the constant tension, unpredictability, and emotional manipulation, your nervous system begins to stabilize. You start to breathe more freely, to think clearly, and to recognize the value of your own emotions and needs. You reclaim parts of yourself that were suppressed, regain clarity in decision-making, and begin to rebuild a sense of identity outside the toxic dynamic. What was once confusing or overwhelming now begins to feel like liberation. The longer this silence continues, the more stark the contrast becomes. Where they spiral into anxiety and chaos, you cultivate calm, resilience, and strength. Each quiet day not only restores your autonomy, but also demonstrates, through absence alone, the power of reclaiming your emotional world. As the days stretch into weeks, this divergence deepens. Your silence communicates a message no words could convey. You are no longer available as a tool to stabilize or inflate their ego. And that message, more than any confrontation or argument, shatters the narrative they have meticulously maintained. It forces them to reckon with a reality they cannot manipulate. The possibility that their influence over you has ended permanently. Each moment of quiet reinforces your agency and underscores the difference between self-sufficiency and dependence. The contrast between your clarity and their chaos becomes undeniable, illustrating the profound impact of withdrawal on a narcissist and the liberation it brings to the one who finally steps outside their orbit. They begin to ruminate, replaying every interaction and imagining scenarios that may or may not have happened. They search for explanations, inventing reasons why you are no longer engaging. The uncertainty gnaws at them relentlessly, but it is not the relationship itself that they miss. What they truly long for is the reflection of themselves they used to see in your responses. The affirmation, the attention, the validation that made them feel important. Meanwhile, your silence functions as a restorative force. Each quiet moment allows fragments of yourself, long suppressed, to return. The contrast is stark. What is peaceful and empowering for you becomes destabilizing and threatening for them, exposing the imbalance that has always defined the relationship. As the silence settles, profound shifts begin within you. At first, the change feels slow, disorienting, and even unsettling, but beneath the surface, a quiet relief begins to emerge. Your nervous system, conditioned to perpetual hypervigilance, starts to recognize that the constant threat has diminished. Years of anticipating unpredictable moods, manipulations, and outbursts have trained your body to live in a state of tension, even during seemingly calm moments. It is natural then for the initial stillness to feel uncomfortable, agitating, or even suspicious. This reaction is not a failure. It is biology adjusting to a new reality. Over time, the fog lifts, your mind untangles, and the weight of constant alert begins to ease. As clarity begins to take hold, you notice changes in your thoughts and perceptions. Without the incessant pressure to predict, react, or appease, your mental space starts to expand. Sleep improves, emotional reactivity diminishes, and moments of stillness, long absent, begin to surface. This is your nervous system recalibrating, recognizing that the danger has lessened and that you no longer need to exist in a perpetual state of survival. Healing in this context is self-directed. It does not require their apology, acknowledgement, or closure. The silence itself becomes a vehicle for reclaiming autonomy, for regaining control over the emotional bandwidth once monopolized by their demands, crises, and manipulations. With each passing day, you reclaim fragments of your identity that were previously eclipsed by the relationship. You rediscover the ability to feel your own emotions fully, to make decisions grounded in your values, and to think clearly without the interference of fear or manipulation. Where once you walked on eggshells, measuring every word and reaction, you now move with a growing sense of self-possession. The quiet allows you to reconnect with your boundaries, your intuition, and your innate sense of worth. In contrast, the narcissist experiences the same silence as chaos. They feel the absence of control like a void, and while you are healing, they are unraveling, confronted with the fragility of an identity built entirely on external validation. Over time, the contrast between your inner calm and their internal turbulence becomes undeniable. What begins as uneasy stillness gradually transforms into clarity, strength, and freedom. Your nervous system learns to trust its own rhythms again, recognizing that emotional stability does not depend on someone else's approval or manipulation. This is the true essence of liberation, a reclaiming of mental, emotional, and psychological space once ceded to their influence. The silence does more than remove their control. It illuminates the imbalance, restores your equilibrium, and provides the fertile ground for lasting self-reclamation, proving that recovery does not require them, only your presence and attention to yourself. This prolonged quiet becomes a mirror for both parties, reflecting starkly contrasting internal states. You are moving toward restoration, clarity, and autonomy, while they are descending into agitation, confusion, and an escalating sense of inadequacy. Your silence exposes the imbalance that existed throughout the relationship, highlighting just how much emotional labor and energy had been ceded to maintain their sense of superiority. Every day you maintain that quiet reinforces your boundaries and strengthens your psychological independence. You are no longer reacting out of fear, obligation, or a need to appease. Your responses, or lack thereof, become deliberate acts of self-preservation and empowerment. The psychological impact of this silence cannot be overstated. For you, it creates an opportunity to rebuild your self-concept, recognize your inherent worth, and integrate the lessons of the past without the interference of someone else's manipulative influence. Each moment of quiet allows your nervous system to downshift from a state of hypervigilance into one of equilibrium. You start to experience clarity in decision-making, freedom in expressing your emotions, and confidence in asserting your needs without guilt. For the narcissist, however, every day without your engagement is destabilizing. They are forced to confront the fragility of a self that was always dependent on external supply, experiencing the growing panic, frustration, and internal chaos that your silence creates. Ultimately, the silence serves as both a protective measure and a transformative tool. It dismantles the unhealthy patterns that kept you trapped while forcing the narcissist to face the consequences of losing control. The longer the quiet endures, the more your autonomy solidifies and the more evident their dependency and fragility become. You emerge from this silence with renewed clarity, stability, and strength, while they remain trapped in a cycle of agitation, projection, and fear. In this dynamic, absence becomes not only a refuge, but a powerful instrument of psychological liberation, allowing you to reclaim the life, peace, and emotional space that was once consumed by the manipulation and chaos of their presence.